Hello and welcome to Mountain Climbers. I have been looking forward to chatting with this father daughter pair. It is my privilege to have James and Yanissa Cumings on this episode of Mountain Climbers. So, about a month ago, I had the honor of sharing my story with James and his co host, Dave, on their podcast, Exercise Your Faith, which is on fire, by the way. You have a chance, you should totally check it out because God is doing amazing things through them. But James told me that not only does he have a chronic illness, but his daughter has the same disease that he is battling. And so my heart just went out to them and it responded to their story because I know what it was like to be a teenager and have to face the emotional, physical, social mountains that come with disease. And then to be on the flip side and be in James' shoes and have to watch your daughter struggle with the disease that you know firsthand, the pain that it can bring, I'm sure is not easy. But James and Yanissa have what it takes to climb this mountain, and that's God's strength. And I love advocating for people with chronic illnesses and giving them the avenue to voice their experiences so they can educate the public on the chronic illness community with a biblical outlook that fosters empathy. And there's no one better to do that than James and Yanissa. So let's go connect with them via Zoom. And here's what I'm hoping will come out of this episode, especially if you have experienced a mountain of disease that has just come out of nowhere and knocked you off your feet. You'll see through James and Yanissa's story that if your strength comes from God, you can climb this mountain and you will make it to the top. Hey, James and Yanissa, thank you so much for being on Mountain Climbers.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for having us. We're excited.
You're welcome. What I'm most excited about this Mountain Climbers episode is it's unique. It's a father-daughter pair. And so we're going to get something for younger generation and older generation to get out of this. And I'm so excited to see the different perspectives that will come from this interview. And so, first of all, just share with our viewers a little bit about your family, where you're from. Yanissa, how old are you, and what grade will you be in the fall?
Go ahead.
I'm 13 and I'm gonna be a freshman in high school.
Okay.
Yeah. So we live in a little town in Southern California, about 30 minutes from Magic Mountain, and I grew up here and graduated from here, and I teach here at a middle school here in our town. And we've been here for a while, and most of our family's here at this town, and so we've got some deep roots that are here. So, and I've got my lovely wife Sandra, and I have my other daughter. Her name is Sienna. She's 12 years old.
Oh, okay. So you're a big sister, Yanissa.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you guys close?
Yeah, we're pretty close.
Oh yeah.
Yes, I have an older sister, and we're extremely close, and she's always been super protective of me because of my disease. So, you do not mess with her baby sister. So, so I can imagine that you guys probably have the same relationship. But, like I just mentioned disease, and that's why you guys are here to share your story, the mountain that you've had to face because of your disease. And so, James, how old was Yanissa when you just realized that something was not right with your body, and what symptoms were you experiencing?
Well, so for myself, it's now that I see it, I can look back on it and realize that there were things going on early for myself. But for myself, it really came to a head about 8 or 9 years ago. I started having like digestive issues. I started really bad headaches, vision issues, and like it was strange because it just couldn't be pieced together. And every time I tried to like nail something down and say, oh, this is what it was, then something else would have come up. And so it came to a point in, I think it was 2016, where I can remember this day like yesterday. It's so vivid in my mind that, we were driving home from a family member's home, and like I felt like I was gonna swerve off onto the
Wow.
side of the road. And so it was scary, but I thought maybe I was having like a migraine or headaches like I had had in the past. And then a week later, I was in the hospital, and I just thought things were going to be over. I mean, it was a really scary time. I mean, they couldn't figure out what was going on. I couldn't process information. I just felt like I was in a bubble. It was like, it was scary.
Yeah.
And so came out of that situation, and still didn't have a lot of answers at that time, which, as you know, not knowing is just part of the problem. So that's kind of how it all started.
Yeah. Well, had you been healthy up until that point?
Yeah, I love working out. I love sports. I worked out twice a day. I played basketball probably 5 nights a week. I mean, I was really active. I love working out. I love that, that part of it. And then all of a sudden my body just started to slow down, and I was like, okay, wait a minute, I'm not that old, like what's going on here? How are things slowing down so quickly? And just my body was just shutting down because of what was going on inside of it. And, I was trying to manage that the best I could. And it got to the point where fatigue was so bad, I was just like trying to make it through a day of work, so it was hard.
That would be hard, especially being a teacher.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The teacher has to be there as much as possible.
Right. And you're responsible for a lot of kids. And so I can remember there were days where I really didn't feel well. And I'm sure the kids realized it, but I would always just try to do my best just to be present and, do my very best job. So
That would be tough. How long was it, before when, your symptoms began to when you got a solid diagnosis?
Yeah, it took about 2 years. I mean, I saw every local doctor I could. I saw an infectious disease doctor, and he was from Harvard. And I still remember this too. Like, we sat across from him, and he goes, "There's no way that you have Lyme disease." He goes, "There's no way. We don't have those types of ticks here in California. You don't have to worry about that." And he said, "There's 0% chance that your daughters could have it because it doesn't get transmitted that way." And so it was just like, I was excited because I was seeing somebody as prominent as him, but at the same time, I was disappointed because I still didn't have any answers. And so shortly after that, I finally found a Lyme literate doctor. That's important for those of you who are listening and dealing with this kind of stuff. Finding a Lyme literate doctor, someone who knows the disease inside and out, has experience with it, is important. And I finally found one locally. And I'll be honest with you, he wasn't the best doctor, but what I'm thankful for is that I got my diagnosis. He knew what test to give me, and from there, at least I had a starting point in recovery.
Yeah, and I love that you pointed out, that he wasn't the best doctor, because they can be brilliant and be the best in their field, but if they don't have a good bedside manner,
Oh yeah, for sure.
that's like a lot of it. And so
Oh yeah, I can remember sitting there and him saying, and it was the hardest words I've ever had to hear from a doctor. He goes, "I don't know what else to do for you." And I was like, oh my goodness, like that's not something you want to hear from your doctor that's providing care. And so you're right, but it was a great start to a road to recovery.
yeah, it sounds, I mean, a diagnosis is everything. When you finally know what's wrong, you know what you can do from there. And you mentioned Lyme disease comes from a tick bite.
Sure.
Can it be contracted any other way, or is it just from a tick bite?
Yeah, and as you know, like when you don't know what's going on in your body, you research it, right? And so that was the good thing. The good thing is that I put in thousands of hours. I actually became an integrative health practitioner because I was like, I got to find out the answers to this, and I got to help other people. And so one of the things that I found out is that it's not just by a tick. It could be, a mosquito. There are other insects. It's basically a parasite that lives on the outside. And so, and the other thing that we've found out is that it can be transmitted to your children. And so if you have it, that's a possibility. So there's a lot of myths out there when it comes to Lyme disease, and it's important to do your own homework.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely true, to do your own homework. So, so a lot of times you self-diagnose yourself,
Oh yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that, out to educate yourself as much as you can. And, Lyme disease affects people in so many different ways.
Mhm.
How does it affect you on a daily basis, and how have you had to change your lifestyle because of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, what's interesting, and you'll find this the more people that you talk to that have Lyme disease, you're right. It's really dynamic in the way that it impacts people. For myself, it's a lot of neurological issues, and so like I don't know if you've heard about brain fog, just not being able to focus or concentrate. I can remember one time I was standing in a store and there was a woman standing behind me, and I know this, like I taught her son in school. I had him in basketball, and she was looking at me, and I could not remember her name. And like I know I have a history with this person, and so I just felt so bad. And so there were instances like that, or days when you just like your head was so bad that you can't get out of bed. And so those are for me. That's kind of like what I deal with. Like my wife, for example, who's also being diagnosed. I don't know if I shared that with you.
Didn't.
Um, her is more like physical in terms of her body. And
Uh,
so she'll have days where her muscles are throbbing, or she'll have hip pain or neck pain. And so it's really different in the way that it impacts each person.
yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
those changes would be so hard from going to being completely healthy, active, to brain fog, muscle aches, and fatigue. And is it tough to think that a small insect bite,
Right.
could wreak that much havoc on your body? It would for me. So, like, what I want to know is, how have you looked past like what you can't do anymore and the pain you experience to the joy of what you can still do?
Oh yeah, you really come to appreciate things, that's for sure. And so we call them good days, right? And so when you're feeling well, you're like, okay, what are we gonna go do? As a family, we know and appreciate those good days, and so we take advantage of them the best that we can. We go and do stuff. We get out physically and do some things, and so
Mhm.
it just really brings an appreciation when things are taken away from you. Like for example, like I haven't had sugar in probably 5 years. And so one of the things is with Lyme disease is that you really, well, I have anyway, you really have to curtail your diet.
Yeah.
And so you got to take away a lot of processed food, a lot of dairy.
Mhm.
And so like I'll see these guys eating like a cheeseburger and I'm like, oh man, that looks so good. Yeah. Yeah. So there are some adjustments to be made, but you really appreciate things in the end.
Yeah, yeah, and that's true. I mean, that's what you have to do. Look at the good days, find what you can do to help you get through. And so now I want to go to Yanissa,
Yeah.
and it's time for you to talk.
Yeah.
But I want to know. I know you were young when your dad started experiencing symptoms, but do
Mhm.
you remember seeing him sick and in pain? And now, for that matter, your mom, since I know now your mom
Yes.
has Lyme's.
I can remember seeing him laying down in bed. He would get very bad headaches.
Hmm.
Um, I also remember he wasn't able to drive a lot,
Hmm.
Okay.
and he was weak a lot of times and couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah. Well, so when you started experiencing similar symptoms,
Mhm.
did you know what was going on in your body because of what you've seen from your parents?
I didn't realize that I was sick. I just knew I didn't feel right, and I was always nervous.
Yeah,
Now that I know I have Lyme disease, I feel like we could deal with it now. So yeah.
that's a good answer. One thing I want to ask you, like when your body first started having those symptoms, was it hard to admit that you weren't feeling it? 'Cause to me, that would make it real.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. 'Cause then you have to say like, oh, I have to take a step back, and I can't do this. I can't play sports anymore. I can't go to sleepovers, and that would be really tough. So I get you. It's not
Yeah.
easy.
And that was one of the things too, is that she loves to dance, and she's always been a dancer. And so that's kind of one of the things that she's had to back off from just a little bit. And I know that's been hard for her because she loves to dance. She's really good at it. And I know that's been a big change for her too.
Yeah, it is tough. Mine was tennis. I
Oh yeah.
love tennis. I wanted to go to Wimbledon.
Yeah,
Obviously,
absolutely.
that didn't happen, but but so yeah, I get it. And you mentioned this, that um, Lyme disease, even though it is contracted from a tick bite, it can be passed on from parent to child.
Yes.
Is that what happened in this case? Or
It's difficult to tell, but we believe so because we don't remember. And that's the other thing that I wanted to say too. That when you talk about ticks and bites, because a lot of times they'll talk about a bullseye rash. Most people think that that's the way that like 60% of the people who get bit by a tick don't get a rash, and so you'll never know unless you actually physically pull it off your body and know. Um, and so I know that I was bitten as a child because I've had conversations with my mom when we were trying to trace this whole thing back. And she goes, "Oh, yeah, I pulled ticks off you when you were a kid." We used to live in Oregon at the time. And so we were out in the forest all the time. And so, to my knowledge, she's never been bit. And so we just kind of did the math and said, this has got to be it. So,
okay. Has that been hard to think, my daughter has Lyme disease because of me?
yeah, no, it's been really hard, to be honest with you. It's something that me and my wife talk about a lot. And, um, it's a real challenge. I mean, I don't want to get too emotional and, try to do my best here, but no, it's been hard, but we know that God has a plan for us, and that, you know, the enemy tries to trip us up. And that's one of the things that, I'll be honest with you, that's one of the things that's been so inspiring for me. I know that God's plan for us must be so big that
Yeah.
the enemy's tried to take us down and, try to,
Yeah.
keep us from getting up that mountain. So anyway.
Yeah. And like I've discovered as I've gotten older, and, because I've had this disease my whole life, that, God uses you and speaks through you with the disease. So think of how many people he's going to use you who have chronic illnesses, because you can say, like, I've gotten through this, and so can you. And so that's really cool to think about the outreach that you guys are going to have. And yeah. And Yanissa, I want to tell you that when I was your age, I thought that if I admitted I was not okay and said I was angry or sad or didn't understand, then I was basically saying I'm not strong enough to handle this illness. And as I grew up, the Holy Spirit showed me that that's not what God thinks or expects from us. He wants us to come to him with our pain and suffering, because that's how we heal. So I want you to know it's okay to be angry. It's okay to say I'm not okay. So I just want to give you this time to just be completely honest and just share your feelings about how hard this journey has been for you.
It's been very hard. Sometimes I do feel bad that I have missed out on some things, and I do get angry at myself sometimes, but I do know that God has always been here with me and that he will turn this around for my good.
Amen. Yeah, that's such a great answer. And I love that your focus is on God and his strength at this age, because not every teenager your age has that focus. So I think that's amazing. And so you are going to make it to the top of your mountain because of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And so, another thing, Yanissa, growing up, I wish that kids my age had empathy and would have an understanding of what I was going through. So I want you to help teenagers have compassion for the kids or their friends or acquaintances in their class, or just, around them. Help them get an understanding of what they need to grasp about teenagers and kids who have diseases.
Yes. I think the biggest thing to understand is that just because you look healthy on the outside mean you does not mean you feel the same in the inside.
Mm-hmm.
I try to be compassionate to others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, because a lot of the things that people get with chronic illnesses is that, are you really that sick? Or, like, oh, you went on a hike yesterday, but today you're, sleeping for 12 hours. So, like, are you trying to get attention? And people truly just, they do not understand. So, I think that's a great answer. And,
Yeah.
um,
And especially kids her age too, like they just, like you say, they don't have that empathy part of them. I mean, even her sister sometimes will give her a hard time, like, come on, let's go do this. And like, and she knows what's going on.
yeah,
So, I
yeah,
mean, it's hard, and it's given her, I think, a better perspective to look at people and be
yeah,
more understanding, compassionate, and just be understanding.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, it does. It does give you compassion and empathy, and not just for like the mountain you're facing, but no matter what any mountain a person is facing. And, I think that's a really cool aspect of having a disease, and, facing that mountain. And, like, it can't be easy being a father and daughter. And now I know your wife and a mother, um,
Right.
who faces this disease, and you're in the same household. But it's kind of cool in a sense because you have a connection and a bond you would not have otherwise. And
Right.
so this question's kind of twofold. Um, how do you guys uplift and encourage each other? Because you guys know what each other are going through. But how also would you give, encouragement and advice to other households and families who have more than one person in their family, battling the same disease? And
Sure.
how can they have, they need empathy and, compassion for each other, because even though you have the same disease, you don't cope the same way, you don't
Right.
process the same way, and you don't feel things the same way. I mean, you all are going to have different routes to get, to the top of the mountain. So
Yeah.
what advice would you give to people?
Yeah, I would say that, God is so good. And so, like, if I'm having a bad day, my wife will lift me up. She encourages me. And if she's having a tough day physically, then I know that I got to step up and bring my game. And so we just kind of, we really play as a team in that sense. And we do it as a family as well. Because there are days when I know Yanissa's having a bad day, and she's emotional and she's kind of dealing through things, and so we're just more patient, or we go do something different. We keep her distracted and busy, because that's one of the biggest things is that sometimes she doesn't understand, because she's a little bit younger, how she feels,
Yeah,
and so she gets really nervous in certain situations where it's not consistent,
yeah,
and so I think the biggest thing for those of you out there who are dealing with chronic illness, that, some days, it's really the roll of the dice, how you get out of bed and how you're
yeah,
feeling. So, you know, especially for parents who have sick children, it's tough to be patient all the time. And sometimes you can, get frustrated with things. And so, you really got to just lean back on God,
yeah.
use your time of prayer, and find your strength within Him.
Mhm.
That's really the biggest thing, is he's your number one source of energy
Yeah,
and
yeah,
life. And so keep that the center of your life.
yeah. I think that's great advice, and that's how you need to be, and put your focus, because that's what's going to get you through, and have patience, like you said.
Yes, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and Yanissa, I'd love to hear from you, with a sibling, point of view.
Yeah. I would say don't give up on the dreams God has put on your heart.
Amen.
The enemy wants to steal from us, but God is bigger than him, and God will give you new strength each day.
Oh, you go, girl! Like
Mhm.
you need to be a life coach or something. Like,
Yeah.
you have such wisdom for your age. I love it. And you talked about depending on each other as a family. And I believe God gives us our family members because of that. But we also have him to depend on. And I've always said I don't know how people can do it without God's strength. So how have you personally seen God's strength within your medical journey, like through a song or a Bible verse?
Oh yeah, sure. It's really drawn us in close. That's for sure. I mean, that's the one thing, is illness will bring you really close to God, and you got to lean in, depend on Him. I remember at one of our lowest points, we were so desperate for answers. I don't know if you're familiar, or your listeners, but there's a church in Northern California called Bethel, and they have a great healing ministry, and so we just up and went. We traveled like 9 hours in a day, and we went to their service, and it was just amazing. Like,
Yeah.
the anointing on that place is just amazing. And we watched God work. And what's great about it is it builds your faith, right? And so
Yeah.
you see others getting healed and you see
Mhm.
God working. And I mean, we saw miracles that day that, obviously we can't explain. It's just works of God. And so it's really drawn us in close. Our faith has just grown immensely. And even though it's been challenging, don't get me wrong, this has been the roughest patch of our life up to
Yeah.
this point. There have been tremendous blessings as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And Yanissa, what about you? Do you have any Bible verses or songs that you just really clung to?
My dad has given me verses to put on my phone for my lock screen. I just put one on yesterday, so I'm not really sure what it says.
Yeah, one of the ones that I've been showing her recently, that God did not give us a spirit of fear, because that's one of the things that she struggles with is being nervous. And so I wanted her to recognize that, when you're feeling that way, that it's not from God, right?
Yeah.
God doesn't give us that spirit. And so, we try to give her verses that will encourage her
Yeah.
and lift her up.
Yeah. Can I give you a few that I've clung to?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. So these are my top 3. So Isaiah 41:10, Isaiah 40:31, which is exercise or faith podcast theme verse,
Yeah.
and then Romans 8:28. Those mean so much to me and help me get through when I'm feeling really bad. When I had to have surgeries as a girl your age, I would just constantly say Isaiah 41:10 over and over. It's about not fearing.
All
And
right.
so yeah, that's what will definitely get you through. So good job, Dad. That's
Yeah.
exactly what you need to do. You remind me of my parents and what they tried to instill in me when I was her age. So that's awesome. And I think this last question is important because I always like to end mountain climbers with hope and a call to action to give people that feeling like, okay, I do have a purpose despite this mountain. And so I want to ask, and I want both of you to answer, what would you say to someone who's battling a disease, especially someone like you guys, where this disease just came out of nowhere and knocked them off their feet? How would you tell them to cope and just look past what they've lost to the purpose that God has for them despite their disease?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I've had to revisit, sometimes daily, it's just that reminding myself that, that God has put a big mission and dream in my heart. And I want to say that to the people listening, whatever your illness is that this is not from God and it's the enemy who's trying to trip you up from your big dream. And so just know that God has you in his hands and that he'll fulfill the promises that he's placed on your heart. And so it's important to have a good lens that we're looking through. And so looking through God's word and not focusing on the bad reports or, your diagnosis. You are not your diagnosis. You are what God says you are. And so be inspired, be encouraged by what God says about you. And just remember these big dreams that they're not put off to the side.
Yeah.
God just wants you to keep moving towards them and just trust in him.
Yeah. That's great. What do you think, Yanissa?
I think that this isn't gonna last our whole life. We're gonna be healed at one moment, and we're gonna look back and think we could have been stronger, and we were fine during the time.
That's great. Yeah, I think you can look back and see, like, I was okay. God
Yeah.
should sustain me. Like it could have been worse, but God got me through. And every day, every moment, even though like I didn't see it, he was there. And that's why I got through. And I just can't thank you guys enough for coming on Mountain Climbers and just sharing your story. And, I know it's not easy, especially, for you, Yanissa, being how old you are and having this unexpected, mountain form in front of you. It's not easy, especially, missing out on all those milestones that you should have to, get to experience, your age. It's not easy, but the strength that you guys are, just putting out there, the light that you guys illuminate is so, so inspiring. And I think my favorite thing about you guys is that, what you show is even if a mountain forms out of nowhere and just takes your breath, that when your strength comes from the right source, there's not a mountain you can't climb.